welcome you.
All right, good morning all. Thanks for being patient with us as we have some technical difficulties. And welcome on this dreary November morning to this Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Charleston, West Virginia, and the Church of the Larger Fellowship. Welcome to you, old friends and new, young and old. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday in our midst, we are stronger because you are with us. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday, we are stronger because you are with us. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, sexualities, and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are welcome here. Am I muted? Shouldn't be. Can you all hear me? John, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, great. Apologies. We are having some struggles technically this morning, and we keep persevering. So as I said, I'm Reverend Caitlin Cutter-Coylberg, minister of this congregation, and I am joined for this service today by our tech team of Neil Chakrabarty and Matt Connolly. Today's service videos come to us from the Church of the Larger Fellowship, known as CLF for short. CLF is a congregation without walls, connecting people all over the world for spiritual growth, worship, learning, and mutual support. So this service is specifically about their Worthy Now ministry, a liberal religious network for people on both sides of the prison walls. Worthy Now invites people on both sides of prison walls into beloved community. They declare that all persons are worthy of love, respect, and support. Not in some future time when we are better people, but as we are right now. We'll be talking about how you can support this Unitarian Universalist ministry later in the service, but for now, we invite you into our weekly practice of generosity. So Neil and Matt, can you put up our slide, please? Here we go. So as we settle into this service, I invite you to find a candle to light during the chalice lighting time, and to pull out your checkbook or PayPal app, or pull up the donate page on our website, and to give generously to support the work of this congregation. If you also want to pull up the website for Worthy Now or the CLF as you're in this service, you are welcome to, and we invite you to also be curious about them later. But this month, our Share the Plate recipient is Manna Meal. Manna Meal is a vital part of our Charleston, West Virginia community, and it's run by the community. The soup kitchen, located inside St. John's Episcopal Church in the heart of our city, serves as many as 400 people 2 well-balanced, nutritious meals daily. That's breakfast and lunch, 365 days a year, holidays included. In the nearly half a century of service, they've never missed a meal, not even during this pandemic. And of course, as they say, they are so much more than that. But, and I love this bit, they say, as much as we've grown over the years, through the initial spirit of our founding remains at the center of everything we do, to provide nourishment or manna to the hungry, and not just in the form of food. For many, Manna Meal's philosophy of no questions asked makes it a crucial source of sustenance, connection, and even healing. Whether it's a hot meal on a cold day or a judgment-free space and friendly smile, Manna Meal can be counted on to be there. So again, we have our Share the Plate program where we get 25% of each week's offering to a community partner. And this month we are giving to Manna Meal. So please give generously to support the work of this organization and our congregation. So I'm curious, dear ones, about what is nourishing you this week. So if you are on Zoom, I invite you to move into gallery view. Obviously, we are not on Facebook Live. I'm going to try to get us back on there again later. But beloveds on Zoom, if you're willing to move to gallery view so we can wave hi to each other. Hey, John. Hey, Neil. Or just type in the chat box, what is nourishing you this week? What is nourishing you? And that can mean like food, like I definitely was nourished by my dad's chili this week. He's here for the weekend. and also nourished by like my mom's hugs, right? So what's nourishing you this weekend? And I invite you to keep typing those chats as we move into more of these videos from CLF. Oh yeah, I feel like a weekend at a safari park is definitely nourishing heart and minds, Neil. Fun. All right, Neil, can you give us our next video, please?
We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The View, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship.
Paul and Silas, bound in jail, had no money to go their bail. Keep your eyes on that prize. Hold on. Paul and Silas thought they were lost. The dungeon shook and the chains came off. Keep your eyes on that prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on that prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on that prize. Hold on. Hold on. The only chain that a man can stand is that chain, oh, hand in hand. Keep your eyes on that prize and hold on. Hold on. You know, the one thing we did right was the day we started to fight. Keep your eyes on that prize and hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on that prize and hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on that prize and hold on.
Welcome. Welcome to the Church of the Larger Fellowship Worthy Now worship service. Worthy Now is a ministry of the Church of the Larger Fellowship that serves Unitarian Universalists that are incarcerated. This is one of the most important ministries of our entire faith. We honor that you are worshiping with us today, and we thank you for your support. Unitarian Universalism is a non-creedal faith. We do not dictate a mandated belief in a deity. Rather, we are connected through covenant and a commitment to justice and making the world a more equitable place. We gather to be fed spiritually and in community. We gather to remind ourselves we are here to care for each other. Welcome, friends and family. Our chalice lighting words are from Karishma Gottfried. Love loudly. Love loudly, spirit of light, of love, of all that is good and bad and in between. Give me the courage and inspiration to love loudly, to share my joy and compassion with others, to let them know how much I appreciate them. We all give and receive love, but loving loudly is one of the greatest gifts of all. And it is so simple. All it requires is one person who is willing to say to anyone and everyone, you are loved. You are worthy of love. You deserve to be loved. Spirit of life, help me spread love throughout my communities. Help me teach others to love loudly so that it begins to circle around so I can hear it too. I light our chalice. Blessed be.
And I've lit our chalice here in our physical sanctuary building as well. So we've got a Time for All Ages video from CLF, but I watched it and I was like, oh gosh, they keep talking about the story and then they don't tell the story. So I'm going to tell you the story and then we'll listen to a reflection about the story from the Church of the Larger Fellowship. So the story is Mira and the Big Story, and it's written by a Unitarian Universalist religious educator named Laura Alleri. So Laura writes, there was once a green valley that lay between two mountains. Through the valley flowed a river. On each bank of the river stood a village. Long as anyone could remember, the people of the two villages had been enemies. Strange as it seems, it all began with a couple of stories. In both villages, the people loved to tell stories. Most important of all to them were the wonderful stories they told about the beginning. In the beginning, said the people of one village, there was no valley at all, just a flat rocky plain. When the King of Heaven looked down on the earth and saw people wandering around homeless, he decided to give them a place to live. So he sent enormous birds to gather the rocks and pile them into mountains. Between the great ridges, the birds scratched and clawed a channel that filled with rainwater and became the river. Finally, one of the birds led the people to their new homeland. And that, declared the villagers, is how our ancestors came to this valley. Now it belongs to us, a gift from the King of Heaven. In the village across from the river, a different story was told. Long ago, said the village folk, the queen of the earth searched high and low for the perfect people to make their home in the valley. When she found them at last, she sent giant turtles to carry them up the river on their backs. And that, declared the villagers, is how our ancestors came to this valley. Now it belongs to us, a gift from the Queen of Heaven. Day after day, year after year, the people of each village told and sang their own stories until they could no longer imagine the beginning of life in the valley any other way. And on opposite sides of the rivers, when the villagers looked across and saw the others celebrating a different story of the beginning, they became angry. This is not how the story goes. This is our valley. We belong here. There is no room for the others. But born into a little yellow house on one of the villages was a girl named Mira. She grew up hearing stories about the beginning. She knew the valley belonged to her people. She knew the others were enemies. She knew they did not belong. But she was very curious about the other people in the other village, the others. So what she would do, she would go and climb a tree close to the river and peer down at the other village. And sometimes when she was feeling very bold, she would wade across the river. And when she got over there, she found it all looked very familiar. It looked like her own village. And it became an interesting thing where she would go and see things the way the others saw them by crossing the river. But on one of those visits, she fell and cut her foot. She sat down in pain, and then appeared a small boy. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "How can I help you?" Mira was too surprised to answer the other. This was clearly one of the others, her enemy. But he helped her across the river all the same. And he said, "You're not the only one, you know, who's curious about the other." Mira felt jumbled up inside. For the rest of the day, she wondered about this boy. He felt like an odd piece in a jigsaw puzzle. He was the wrong shape, and she could not make this fit. The others were not supposed to be kind. The others were not supposed to be curious. The others were not supposed to be like her. Could the stories be wrong? Mira knew exactly who to take her question to. Old Alfred lived by the river in a house full of books. He was wise and kind, and his mind and heart were as open as his front door. So Mira went to Alfred that very evening and said, "Old Alfred, I need your help. I have a big question, and there's no one else I can ask." Old Alfred was like, "Ooh, a big question? I love big questions. What is your big question?" So she told him all about her secret trip. So she would climb the trees and cross the rivers, about the boy he'd met who seemed like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit with the stories she'd been told. Old Alfred listened carefully. And then he asked, "So what is your big question?" In a small voice, Mira said, "Are the stories wrong?" For a few minutes, old Alfred stared silently up into the night sky. And then he said, "Mira, let me tell you something about stories. Stories can make you bigger, not on the outside, of course, but on the inside. They can stretch your mind and heart. But a story can make you smaller if it takes up all the space of your mind and heart. When new people or new ideas come along, then there's no room for them. So this is the question you must ask when you hear a story. What is the story doing to me? Is it making me bigger or smaller? Our village is dear to me, Mira, but our minds and hearts need to be stretched so that we can make room for others. He looked at Mira and he said, I have a story to tell if you would care to hear it. I would, Mira said. So old Alfred began. Oh, there we go. All right. In the beginning, there was nothing, yet there was everything. Do you ever collect chestnuts? Now imagine holding a chestnut in the palm of your hand. Now imagine something even smaller than that, a little seed, a nut of the universe. It was there, but it was not there yet. The way a sunflower is and is not inside a striped seed, the way a song is and is not inside the wooden shell of a violin. Then there was light. Light that was pure energy, and out of it came unimaginably small bits of matter, the first stuff. Some matter came together and formed stars. Over ages and ages, the stars burned, vast furnaces forging new things deep in their hearts. When the time came for them to die, the stars exploded. All the stuff inside them was scattered into space. It drifted like dandelion seeds on the wind, ready to start something new. From that stardust, old Alfred said, came everything. Clouds and comets, whales and wildebeests, rattlesnakes and redwood trees, emus and elephants, dinosaurs and dragonflies, seahorses and stars. From that stardust came galaxies and solar systems and a little blue planet. From that stardust came the mountains and the valley and the river and the two villages. From that stardust came an old man and his garden and a girl named Mira and a boy who is still a stranger. We all come from the same place and we are all made of the same stuff. We are neighbors on this little planet of ours, sailing through the cosmos. Mira felt like her mind and heart were so full, they would burst. Look at this gorgeous illustration by Sue Todd. I'm loving her illustrations, but look at this beautiful picture. If this story is true, Mira cried, then no one owns the valley and we all belong here. If this story is true, the people across the river are not our others. They are like us. If this story is true, we are all connected to each other and to everything else, the river, the trees, the sky, the ocean, the animals. If this story is true, we have wasted too much time being enemies. Mira began to cry. Old Alfred said gently, Mira, tell me what is in your heart. What about our stories? She sobbed. Dear child, you asked me a big question. Now I will ask you some. Who dreamed everything when they were nothing? Who first lit the stars? Whose hand held the little chestnut? Who opened the heart of that little boy to be kind to his enemy? Who opened your mind to see him as someone like you? Who made you so wonderfully curious, Mira? Mira, you have not lost your gift or the one who gave it. Both are just so much greater than you ever dreamed. I like your story, she replied with a moonlit smile. I think it is big enough for everybody. Well then, said old Alfred, perhaps you can share the story with someone else. I will, promised Mira, getting up from her chair. I already know where to start. I thought you might, smiled old Alfred. Now get yourself home to bed. But old Alfred, answered Mira, stretching out her arms to take in the whole valley and the sky above. I already am home. Then Mira headed out into the starry night. And that's Mira and the Big Story, which was published by our very own Skinner House. Right, and now we have a video from the Church for the Larger Fellowship.
Why is there a wall? It's apparent reflection from UU World edition, spring edition 2021, and it was written by me. In the book, picture book, Mira and the Big Story, 2 villages sat on either side of a river, so close that they could see and occasionally hear each other. In their isolation, each crafted stories about the other that may or may not have been true. And yet, both people had come from the same place, made of the same stuff. A wise elder from one of the villages said that there will never be peace in their valley until the people in both villages find a story big enough for them all. In this book, Mira, a child who in naive curiosity crosses the river, and she makes a friend. If Mira were to look over the walls into prisons today, she might ask, is this a separate village? Why is there a wall? Why are there mostly Black and brown people in the wall? She would be troubled to realize mothers were behind that wall, separated from their children. Why is this when we're all made of the same stuff? The fear of the other has fed institutional bias and contributed to a burgeoning prison industrial complex, a system that exists only to separate and to punish, a system so abusive that it should not be continued and it should not be tolerated. When people or society feel harm, the instinct seems to be isolate, separate, and punish. This permeates all of our relationships, and we teach it to our children from a very young age. I am a mother who has reflected a lot about what it takes to raise a child. I grew up with lessons from Dr. Spock and spare the rod and spoil the child. And then when I attended college, I learned something called proportional response. I still have no idea what that is, but it is clearly part of a culture of punishment manifested in our current prison system. Is incarceration the best society can manage when someone's mere presence makes another one feel harm, even when that first someone has not done nothing? Part of the way I deal with these questions is to rely on my faith. The UU's first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of each person. The 7th principle teaches respect for our interdependent web. We are all worthy, and we are one village. How can we, as people of faith, accept a world that harshly sends people to prison? We need a new message, a message that is not focused on separating, isolating, and punishing, one which is focused on healing and forgiving. May it be so, blessed be.
I invite you to read the words of our unison affirmation with me. Love is the spirit of our faith and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now I invite you to sink into these reflections from the Church of the Larger Fellowship.
My name is Beth Murray, and I work for the Worthy Now Prison Ministry Program at the Church of the Larger Fellowship. We'd like to let you know that the following testimonials from Incarcerated Unitarian Universalists contains references to suicide and transphobia. Please take care of your hearts. From the Voices Within. Benjamin, incarcerated in Georgia, wrote in December after receiving a holiday card from the CLF. I was very close to suicide, and your thoughtfulness stopped me. Thank you. This is a very lonely time of year, and as a mentally ill person, the fight to prove my worth to myself is my endless battle. Thomas, incarcerated in Texas, wrote that he is a trans person in solitary confinement. He's held in solitary because it is the only place the prison facility can keep him safe. He's allowed outside 20 minutes every day. And what he misses most is seeing the trees, which are not visible beyond the barbed wire. A reading titled Buddy by John, incarcerated in Oklahoma. She arrived early Monday morning, homeless, forlorn looking, carried by the maintenance worker who had found her. By afternoon, she had perked up and was attentive and active. In fact, she'd become comfortable enough that it seemed she liked being held, but that may have been because of the air conditioning and her lack of feathers. Still, she would nestle down in my cupped hand and go to sleep. By evening, she was exploring her new surroundings energetically, scurrying around the room, exercising all her muscles, her appetite bordered on ravenous. When darkness fell and she settled in for the night in my left shoe, the world seemed at peace. Apparently, that's the way she died, peacefully during the night. There was no indication of any problems when she nestled herself into my shoe, and I checked on her every time I awoke. Few will miss this awkward, ragged-looking, not yet fledged baby starling, but I will. Buddy was loved for a day, if only by me. But that's more than some beings on this planet get. And she brought joy to several people in that short time. I suspect that her mother grieves her missing child. I know I do. But I also know that I was blessed by this little time that our lives touched. I hope she was as well. John died in November 2020.
When Michael, Aisha, and I were in discernment about coming to the CLF, about joining as the new lead ministry team, We talked about the different areas and aspects of the church of the larger fellowship. We talked about all the great things that the church of the larger fellowship does. We just talked about everything, and we dreamed about what it could be, what it is. And we talked about the areas in which we had a special calling to ministry. And I talked about the Worthy Now prison ministry and my calling in particular to that ministry. I come from a community that knows very firsthand what the prison industrial complex means. We know what it means to not know where somebody is because they're in transit. We know what it means to not see a relative just because they haven't gotten a notice that they needed. We know what it means to have people denied medical care because their commissary account is overdrawn. We know what it means to have people caged and locked away. So I felt this special calling to the Worthy Now prison ministry, and I loved that it was called Worthy Now. I love so much that we center our CLF prison ministry around the idea that everyone is worthy now, not later, not in 2 years, not in 5 years, but now we are all worthy of love. It doesn't mean that each of us has to love every single person. We may not be at that place where we can love that individual, but we know that that individual is worthy of love. They're worthy of the Spirit's love. They're worthy of God's love. They're worthy of the universe's love. When we came to the Worthy Now prison ministry, when I became the director of the Worthy Now prison ministry, one of the things that I wanted to change was small. I wanted to change how we talk about our Worthy Now folks. Prior to when I got here, we talked about our incarcerated CLF members. And while it's important to make a distinction between our incarcerated CLF members and our free world CLF members, it was interesting to me that we didn't talk about ourselves as Unitarian Universalists first and foremost. Yes, we are members of this beautiful church of the larger fellowship, but first and foremost, we are Unitarian Universalists. So I asked that we change the way we talk about ourselves, and we start talking about ourselves as incarcerated Unitarian Universalists, because I think it's so important for us to understand that though by the grace of God, that person who is incarcerated would be in the pews with us in our bricks and mortar congregations. They would be with us here on Zoom. They would be with us on Facebook. They would be with us in all the different ways that we experience Unitarian Universalism, except they are caged by the state. In pastoral care, in religious education, in governance, we are breaking open what it means to be an incarcerated Unitarian Universalist. In the future, in Worthy Now prison ministry, we are going to be engaging our incarcerated Unitarian Universalists and our free world UUs in what it means to examine the eighth principle. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. That is the eighth principle. And we will be talking about it both in ways that talk about Unitarian Universalism, but also our accountability to each other in our CLF community. As our community begins to explore this accountability with the recommendations from Widening the Circle and the eighth principles, I'm going to ask yourselves, when is our more convenient season? When have we put off for tomorrow that which must be done today? What I will also encourage you to do, what we will encourage you to do and work with you to do, is to personally examine those moments when it feels helpless or confusing. When this work that asks us to be doing it now feels like maybe there would be a better time later on. Those moments of discomfort tell us something about ourselves if we only allow our bodies and our minds to pause and examine that discomfort. Because to sit in discomfort and suppress our own immediate needs in pursuit of learning something about another's is part of our highest calling. It is part of the calling that we hear from our incarcerated UUs. And it is part of our theology of liberation. My colleague, the Reverend Teresa Inés Soto, says that you are here to put out the ravenous flames of the world. Enough is enough. In their words, I hear that liberation is everyone else's responsibility and it is our sacred responsibility. And in the Worthy Now prison ministry, I hear that our most convenient season is now. Right now. No other, but now. We can try to avoid the discomfort of that, or we can face it head on, knowing that if we do it with each other, if we do it in community, in this time, and in solidarity with communities whose lived experiences are the keys to dismantling racism and oppression, we can find that liberation. We can find each other's worthy. Yes, and we can find it now.
We also celebrate abolition, the grandmother of US resistance movements. Black and white abolitionists perfected the speaking tour, the rally, the boycott, and cultivated leadership for later struggles such as the suffrage and labor rights. They also created the clandestine underground movement called the Underground Railroad, which has been noted by some historians as one of history's most intricate networks of conspiracy. The railroad, a widely cast network of aid stations, for the specific purpose of helping enslaved people escape, helped to free between 40,000 and 100,000 people. Many conductors were Black, such as Jane Lewis, a Black woman of New Lebanon, Ohio, who was known for her heroism in regularly rowing escaping enslaved folks across the Ohio River. I imagine the cold mist on the river as she rowed, steering her precious cargo through the moonlit waters. Such courage, duty, and love. For some, Unitarians or Universalists, slavery was incompatible with their belief system. An excerpt from a protest against slavery by 173 Unitarian ministers published in 1845 stated, "By our political, commercial, and social relations with the South, by the long silence of Northern Christians and churches, we have given the slaveholders reasons to believe that it is only the accident of our position which prevents us from engaging in this system as fully as themselves. Our silence, therefore, is upholding slavery. Our silence, therefore, is upholding slavery. And we must speak against it in order not to speak in its support. We contend for mental freedom. Shall we not denounce the system which fetters both mind and body?" So how does this relate to our moment? As the principle of Sankofa tells us, history is now, right? We are a part of it, and we must use what we've learned from it to move forward in optimal well-being. First, we may draw courage and inspiration from these examples and witness the parallels of our times. Our struggle for abolition continues. The American criminal justice system holds about 2.3 million people in over 1,800 state prisons, 110 federal prisons, about 1,700 juvenile correctional facilities, 3,100 local jails, 218 immigration detention facilities, and 80 jails held in native country, as well as in military prisons, civil commitment centers, state psychiatric hospitals, and prisons in the US territories. And the inequities are extreme. Despite making up close to 5% of the global population, the US has nearly 25% of the world's prison population. And the rate of incarceration is much higher for Black, Indigenous, and people of color than for white people, despite comparable rates of offense. Also, together with the federal government, over 4,100 corporations profit from mass incarceration in the United States. Because as one of our local leaders here in Akron does, Demario Cooper, reminds us that the US is addicted to free labor. And the reality is that the mass incarceration system we have in this country is an extension of the slave labor system of the antebellum era. Prisoners producing everything from park benches to toilet paper, to microchips, to ghoulishly, even police and prison guard uniforms. As we navigate the ways to combat this system, we remember our ancestors like Jane Lewis, rowing over the river, rowing through the anxiety, rowing through the worry, rowing through the struggle, and rowing toward a brave space. We can draw inspiration from the ways that UU history speaks to us through this moment. The struggling for more equity is part of our tradition. We have been part of a progressive movement for longer than the lifespan of this country and have consistently been on the forefront of social change and innovation. In my own church here in Akron, Ohio, the ancestors of my congregation hosted the second Women's Rights Convention. They're at the Universalist Old Stone Church. Former slave Sojourner Truth electrified the gathering with her innate I Am Woman speech. I wonder sometimes, what was the board meeting like before that convention was convened? What were the worried comments? What were the concerns of the congregation? Was there a vote held? Was there a sigh of satisfied relief when the motion was passed? That's a history that we in Akron are still working through. And yet, that question, it remains in all of our congregations. And I think it's important for us to remember that, again, abolition is the grandmother of our movement. Abolition is the goal. The US is a settler colonial corporation designed to extract labor, land, and resources from Black, Indigenous, and people of color, but abolition is the central and most direct way to combat that. I believe that this moment represents a renewed focus on racial and social justice and human rights. And I also sometimes see a kind of compartmentalizing of causes, especially in mainstream liberal and progressive white-dominated spaces and institutions. People feel like, well, I'm doing something because on Sunday I go to my food justice ministry, Tuesday is the Black Lives Matter rally, Wednesday night is yoga, and Friday I'm making phone calls to elect a straight white male Democratic candidate who rails against defund the police. We need better. And we need to understand that when we are talking about Free Palestine and Black Lives Matter, we're talking about ending a whole system, not just the ones that make us comfortable. And here in the US, the slave system is still in power. Our children are calling us to an equitable future, like our hymn, The Fire of Commitment, from the dreams of youthful vision, one not imagined by slavery, and yet imagined by what our world can be when we all live with the idea that we have worth, we have dignity, and that our values and our actions must reflect the values and actions of all of us, not just one culture. We have a duty to provide our children and our future the tools to accomplish this. And I believe that together we can. Thank you.
So each week, we light a second flame for those of us affected by COVID-19, which is all of us and some more than others. As I light this flame, I invite you to share in the chat window or the comment section who or what you want held in the hearts of our congregation. Who or what is on your mind and heart today, beloveds? Please type in the chat section as I light our second candle. And beloveds, I know we're going a little past noon today. I invite you to stay with us as you are able. So I know on my mind and heart today, I know I'm holding in love today all those whose mental health has suffered during these pandemic months, whether your challenges have anything to do with the pandemic or not. I hope you are finding healthy coping and good support. I hope all of us can hold each other in community care and mutual support. We know as a beloved community that it's not just self-care that we are called to, but community care, something beyond each of us alone. And as we do each week, we hold all of those who are grieving, whatever you are grieving, whoever you are grieving, we hold you in love. Whatever joys and sorrows you brought to our service today, we are glad that you are here. We are so glad that you are here. So at this time, I invite you to sink into this prayer by my friend and colleague, Reverend Dr. Michael Tino.
Would you please join me in a moment of prayer, of centering for yourself? Spirit of life and love, God of many names and beyond all naming, we gather today in deep gratitude for all of the blessings of our lives, for the joys that lift us up, for births and for laughter, and for the ability to be together in community. And as we feel that gratitude in our lives, we ask that your presence be with those who are experiencing hardship and sorrow, those in our midst who are here despite great pain and grief and sickness, those that we love and that we know we are connected to, and those all across our world who we have never met, but we know are experiencing loss and hardship and grief and sadness and injustice. Today, may your strength especially be with those Unitarian Universalists to whom we are so deeply connected, who right now are behind the walls of prisons all over the world. May they know that they are connected to us. May they feel our love radiating out from us to them. In your many holy names we pray. Amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rising. Spirit. All right. I have to admit, I find it really painful to think about our prison industrial complex, about how many human beings our country puts in cages. It makes my heart hurt. These statistics, the inequity and injustice of how many of our fellow human beings, especially and particularly our Black, Indigenous, and Hispanic beloveds, are put in cages by our so-called justice system. It's a smoothly running, cruel and violent modern slavery system, a legal system of very profitable enslavement. And ultimately, of course, it's a cruel and inhumane system that causes harm to all of us, because we are all part of this interconnected web. We know, of course, that it's hurting some a lot more than others. So I'm really grateful for the Worthy Now ministry of the CLF, grateful for how clearly the folks running it connect the large and sometimes intimidating work of prison abolition, of liberation, with the immediate heart-centered work of caring for those of ours stuck inside those cages. And by those of ours, I'm referring to our Unitarian Universalists specifically, stuck in the literal cages of our prison industrial complex, but ultimately, just like all of our elders of the world are elders to us all, and the children of our world are all our children. We are all connected with those who have been labeled criminals, many for like technicalities and nonviolent offenses, and thrown into cages. It's good to remember that these aren't faceless criminals. These are people, and some of them are part of our Unitarian Universalist tradition and community. These are our people, and they can use our help, not someday, but right now. I appreciated that reminder from Reverend Aisha, because I'm thinking about the holidays, a stressful time for many, but when is our more convenient season? When we have put off for tomorrow what must be done today. Not everything needs to happen right now, right? But our theology of liberation calls us to ask what we can do right now. What possibility can we be embracing in this moment? That was our theme for September, right? Embracing possibility. But it's also just kind of the theme of this year, embracing possibility, embracing what is possible, asking ourselves what we can do, alongside asking what we need to let go of doing. We are here to put out the ravishing flames of the world, in the words of my beloved colleague, Reverend Teresa Ninan Soto, as quoted by the inestimable Cristina Rivera, and at the same time, to honor our shared fire of commitment, to honor our shared values by taking action to uphold them. So in just a few minutes, we're going to have our hymn video, our closing hymn video for Fire of Commitment. And when that comes on, I invite you to really listen, I invite you to sing along to the lyrics of that hymn, because we have such a legacy to live into. And from the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. Because we can take action, can do meaningful things right now. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. Even in the most stressful time, we have the opportunity to listen, and from the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. The hymn ends with the words, "From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice." And in the spirit of that final verse, we have this video, this invitation made by Tanner Linden, who I had the privilege of knowing when he was a youth leader in Unitarian Universalism in California and nationally. So we have 3 final videos from CLF, starting with an invitation to involvement.
I'd like to introduce you to Eileen Raymond. Eileen is a free world pen pal who joined our prison ministry program in 2013. She was passionate about prison reform and wanted to be the light to someone experiencing the darkness of prison. Shortly after she joined, she was matched with John, one of our members currently living in a Texas prison. And as she began to build relationship with John, she discovered that this program, this relationship she was building, it wasn't at all what she expected. And so I'd like us to hear directly from Eileen about how that experience has transformed her, how it's changed her, and what she's learned from John and learned about herself. Let's hear from Eileen.
I became interested in CLF's prison ministry almost a decade ago. Prisons have been a cottage industry where I live in Northern New York since the 1980s. As I thought about the men and women, mainly from New York City, who find themselves assigned to prisons up here, 8 to 9 hours from their families and often in solitary confinement, I thought how difficult it must be to be cut off from family and friends. Since my life motto has always been, just because I can't do everything doesn't mean I shouldn't do the one thing I can do, I applied to Worthy Now to become a pen pal to someone incarcerated in the United States. I was paired with John, a young Black man incarcerated in Texas. When I tell friends that I have a pen pal in a Texas prison, they seem surprised and curious. Why? What do you write about? And I have to admit that I too wondered what to put in that first letter. I'm a white retired college professor living a comfortable middle-class life here in Canton with my wife. What could I possibly have in common with this young man? Like any new venture, the way to start is just to start. I told John a little bit about my interests and activities and asked him what he was interested in. I soon learned that he likes to write. After he shared a few poems with me, I decided to type them up so he could see them in print. To date, John has shared literally hundreds of poems with me. When he asked about how to find poetry contests that he could enter, I helped him prepare the entries for several significant national contests. Let me share a poem he shared with me. I have a vision. Rain pours like a falling cup, drenching the foundation of my heart, sogging me to the very core. The rays of the sun dry me up, cracking like fault lines in the earth. Scorched beyond repair, my soul is sore. Sullen and put out by my world, wishing to be the source of good deeds, longing for a way to promote global happiness. Equal rights for humankind, race or creed, boy or girl, peaceful nations and unions for our seeds, letting our actions, not religions, display righteousness, living with differences by understanding, judging none, learning to love and accept all, bonding together for the common goal. Create ways for outreach and start helping, holding ourselves accountable. We will not fall. It starts by a vision. This could be a global goal. One thing I have learned is that my idea that I would be helping my pen pal was way too limiting. 5 years ago, my son was tragically killed. When I finally wrote John about why I had not written recently, he responded, I'm very hurt to hear about Warren. I truly understand life isn't meant to be this way. Children should bury parents in old age, not a parent burying their child. Eileen, I'm very sorry. I know the anger that comes with death and all the what ifs as you spoke of. I'm confident you will not turn over to the dark side, but even you will be weak at times. And that's okay. As human beings, we are entitled to own our emotions. I won't tell you it'll be okay and you'll move on, because you won't and aren't supposed to. Never let Warren go. He belongs to your heart. You can learn to embrace him even through death. My journey with Worthy Now has expanded my awareness of our interdependence more than I can ever expected. I set out to bring light to a fellow human being, and I ended up learning what true friends do for each other. As I minister to John, he ministers to me. Worthy Now makes all this possible by supporting free world participants like me, but even more importantly, by facilitating the growth of our more 1,000 members serving time in our country's prison system. That's why I support Worthy Now, and I invite you to join us in this ministry in whatever way you can.
From the light of his remembered turns the beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our minds the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
As we end our time together, we carry with us the light of love and connection to each other and to Unitarian Universalists all over the world, whether they are in the free world or part of the carceral state. Deep gratitude for my colleagues and everyone who took part in bringing this special service to all of you. I want to read an excerpt from a letter written from one of our incarcerated Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship members. George had written an appreciation for a remembrance that was published in our monthly publication, Quest. George writes, quote, "I have lost so much being incarcerated. My friends and family have passed or moved on over the years. My emergency contact information is blank. I often wondered who would ever miss me if I passed. This touching article answers that question for me. Your kind words and acts of remembrance are soul-inspiring. I just want to say thank you for all that you do. I know that sometimes we, the incarcerated, forget to tell you that we appreciate all you do. Please keep up the good work and know that you are not forgotten." Beloveds, I will extinguish our chalice, but not the light of love and justice. Go forth and carry the flame. Carry with you the Unitarian Universalist charge that we are here to care for each other.
Beloveds, we are here to care for each other. So as we end our service today, I want to end with this final question. What do you see as a way you can care for others right now? What is feeling possible for you in the work of love and liberation? So remember, you are enough just exactly as you are, and you are not alone. So blessed be, beloveds, and thank you for bearing with us through all these technical difficulties we had today. I'm going to end our recording.